Now, the preliminary probe into the crash of Air India Flight 171 has left more questions than it provided answers. While an investigation is still underway, initial reports have put the spotlight on the plane's fuel switches and their role in the final seconds of the flight that led to the fateful crash on the 12th of June. Fuel switches, they play a critical role in regulating fuel flow to the plane's engines. They're placed in the cockpit and pilots use them to start or shut down engines on the ground, or to manually restart engines if an engine failure occurs during a flight. Now, they are located below the thrust levers and they are spring-loaded to remain in position. If they are moved to cut off, engine power is immediately cut off. Now, the report said that once the aircraft achieved the top airspeed of 180 knots, both engines, fuel switches, transitioned from run to cut off, and this happened within 1 second. As per the cockpit voice recordings mentioned in the report, one pilot could be heard asking the other pilot as to why did he cut off the fuel, to which the other pilot, of course, responds saying he did not do it. So then who cut off those switches? Now, the pilots seemed to have attempted to restore fuel flow with fuel switches moving back to the run position within seconds, but insufficient time and altitude prevented successful restart of the engines, and the aircraft eventually crashed. At the crash site, both fuel switches were found to be in the run position. Captain Sumit Sabarwal, a seasoned pilot with over 15,600 hours of flight experience, was the pilot in command of the Air India flight, while First Officer Clive Kundar was his co-pilot. The report so far says that both pilots were medically fit and well rested ahead of the flight. Aviation experts believe that pilots were very unlikely to accidentally move the fuel switches since they are built in a manner that prevents accidental actions. Now, aviation experts also suggest that a chip malfunction may have led to the fuel switches transitioning on their own to the cutoff position, thereby starving the engines of fuel. And according to Marco Chan, who is an aviation expert and a former pilot, cutoff came from an error with the chip for which the engine manufacturer had issued a service bulletin advising maintenance in order to prevent signal loss.
I believe the FAA has, or together with GE General Electric, the engine manufacturer, has issued a service bulletin, i.e. I believe it was about 11,000 cycles. They will have to replace the chip. And if it is not replaced or maintenance isn't done correctly, it could lead to intermittent loss of signal. Once you have a loss of signal, the fuel isn't commanded, i.e. in the cutoff position, then there's no fuel going to the engine, which seems to have matched what the service bulletin was saying with this current investigation.
Now, this preliminary report also mentions a special airworthiness information bulletin which was issued in 2018 by the Federal Aviation Administration. It had flagged potential problems with fuel control switch locking mechanisms on Boeing aircraft. And these locking features prevent inadvertent movement of the switches. But when the lock is disengaged, the switches can potentially be moved even by vibration, inadvertent touch, or other factors. The FAA did not consider this serious enough to issue a mandatory directive, but the bulletin recommended inspections as an advisory. The report also noted that the emergency locator transmitter, or ELT, did not activate when the aircraft crashed into the medical college. The ELT is designed to activate automatically upon significant impact or manually. Its failure to activate points to a possible malfunction of the system. All right, joining me live on the broadcast now is Captain Ehsan Khalid, veteran IAF Indian Air Force pilot, ex-airline captain, instructor and examiner, aviation expert with over 40 years of experience. Sir, thank you so much for joining us here on the broadcast. And as we've been discussing, and of course, the talk of the town regarding what really happened, the preliminary report at this point, is it too soon to arrive at any kind of a conclusion? All eyes seem to be on those switches. What made them to go to the cutoff position and what brought them back to the run position? Sir, you'll just need to fix your audio. We're unable to hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
The thing is that, it is not too soon to come to a conclusion, because the conclusion has already been arrived at. So on 11th of July, FAA has already issued an advisory with a clear sentence that the AIB preliminary report does not warrant any technical or safety concern on Boeing 787. So this particular presumption that we should not come to a conclusion has already been concluded. That is one part. That is, there is no technical flaw with the aircraft. Number two, the fuel switches transitioning from on to off or off to on position, cut off to on position, okay, is the reason of speculation. And we do not know whether the fuel switches were transitioned because of the electrical malfunction or MN4 chip malfunction, which the expert was also saying it is an GE advisory 2020 and 2021. Whether that malfunction, we do not know. We also do not know where the engines already malfunctioning from the time that it crossed the V1 speed and thereafter it continued, because why the landing gear was left down is also silent. Okay, the only thing that we know is that it did transition down from transition from run to cutoff at time 42 and then at 47. You know, that is a time frame that it happened. Whether that happened in response to an engine failure which was already existing, we do not know. We do not know whether the pilot carried out a dual engine failure checklist, and during that checklist, did he ask, did you shut down the engine? He says, I did not do so, and thereafter the pilot would say, do it. Okay, so we do not know what was being, what checklists were done. We also do not know what all failure warning signals were not available. It is a wrong conclusion. It is a wrong hypothesis that the pilot saw the switches not in the off or on position, because there is a pilot flying, he's looking outside, there is a pilot who is monitoring the system. The pilot flying, in case of a failure, all pilots are trained to look at the warning messages, not at the switch position. So the pilot flying will not investigate the switch position. We are trained to trust the other pilot, and we are carrying out a checklist item by memory. And that is what is being done. So if the pilot who is flying, and he could not have inadvertently gone and switch it off, the pilot who was monitoring, if he went down to, he can also not do it inadvertently. That thing is out. It can only be done intentionally. And if he has done intentionally, pilot flying will not come to know of it, not in 10 seconds, not in 30 seconds, but not in half an hour that pilot flying would ever know that the switch was moved. This is my pilot's last 40 years of experience, that the pilot flying does not see the position of the switches while doing emergency drill. So I don't know. There's so many things which are missing in this entire thing that it does not make a complete picture.
Captain Khalid, let me just come in there. Now, from all that you've shared so far, and this is, I want to understand in your appreciation, sir, this conversation, and that is also being talked about a lot, where the main pilot would ask the co-pilot, why did you cut it off? And he said he did not. From your entire 40 years of experience, what exactly led to that exchange between the two pilots, if you can, in your hypothesis? Okay.
The statement, when it is recorded in the CVR, is not as clear as we are talking. There is a lot of engine sound, there is a panic sound, there are so much of sound. So it is very easily misunderstood. Why did you cut off or did you cut off? Both these two things would mean different. Like, I'm the pilot who is asking for the emergency drill. I say dual engine failure memory checklist. So the pilot not flying or monitoring will carry out checklist, engine rumble, run switch off, and then on, off, and on. And this will be a challenge and response system. Okay. But the pilot does it fast because time is not there. Then the pilot would ask, did you switch it off? He said, no, I did not do it. Then do it. Okay. So if I have the entire conversation, then it will look like part of checklist. But if I have a selected two sentences, and that too not the sentence, but an inference of the sentence, then it is interpretation. It is not what the pilot said. Did you switch off? Why did you switch off? No, they were not sitting in the cafe. If it was not switched off, nobody will ask the question. They will go and put it on. Okay. Once again, I will reiterate. If pilot flying was Kundar and Sabarwal was pilot not flying and monitoring, and if he inadvertently or intentionally went to switch off the engine, Kundar would have not known for next 30 minutes, not 30 seconds. For next 30 minutes, he would not have known, and he would have, because his load, information load on him would be so high, aircraft will not be controllable. There will be at least 50 warnings on. There would be horns blaring. He would not know what has, even if you would have asked his name, Kundar would not have known it at that point of time. So it is quite preposterous to think that they were having a chit chat like they were seated in the cafe. Hey, did you do this? No, that it doesn't happen like that.
It's an excerpt from a conversation. We don't know. It's interpretation that is happening, and you need to understand the entire recording if there is more, not go to any kind of a conclusion given one word, one line exchanges between the two pilots.
I will add to it, because when you put bits and pieces together, because 2018 SAIB is infructuous and irrelevant, but that has been introduced in AIB to give a semblance of chance that the switch could have moved on its own and not electrically. And then at a later stage, you would say that it was inadvertently moved because that lock. No, the switch had no lock problem, because we have the photograph. And if the switch survived in its position of run, that means it was in the lock position at the run. After the crash, that means the switch was solidly locked.
So you're ruling out
You're
ruling out any inadvertent movement of the switch. We'll leave it there at this point, sir. It's too early to be, we'll wait for the full report and the investigation to come out, and then perhaps have a more detailed conversation on this. That was Captain Khalid joining us here on the broadcast. Thank you so much for making time for us, sir.
Thank you.